Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to introduce our guest. His name is Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He's a best-selling author of profound book, Toward a Meaningful Life. Please get it. If you've never read it, get it and keep it on your desk or a nightstand. It's profound. It's going to change your life. He is a scholar and he's a spiritual life coach. Thank you for being here, Rabbi Jacobson.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to conversing and reaching your beautiful audience.
I like to start with 67 questions of rapid fire round. Quick answers. Your biggest strength?
I think bridging deep spiritual concepts into practical and applicable form of in our personal, emotional, psychological lives.
Pet peeve?
Music.
Tea or coffee?
Neither. I love seltzer.
Favorite food?
Healthy or unhealthy? If I may
Favorite.
ask. Favorite. Well, ice cream.
So my next question might not apply if it's a pet peeve. I had less music you've heard. You don't listen to music? Is that?
I know I do listen to music. The last
So what was
music
the
I
last
heard,
one?
Jimi Hendrix.
Wonderful. Sunrise or sunset? Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Guilty pleasure?
Procrastination.
Notepad or notebook?
Notepad.
Best gift received?
A set of a Hasidic encyclopedia.
A phone call or text?
Phone call.
When giving a speech, do you want to be well prepared ahead of time or you improvise?
Improvise.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Sensitive. Thorough. Looking for a third word.
It can be 2. Doesn't have to be 3. You can leave it
Let's
at
keep
that.
those 2.
Sensitive and thorough. Is there anything people will be surprised to learn about you? People who might watch and know you.
Yes.
What would that be?
That I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert.
Great. That was a fire round. So we're now, we'll move to other questions that you can answer, elaborate on as long as you want. The first one is there anything left of Jacobashvili in you?
Yes. For good or for bad, maybe, but yes, absolutely. You want me to describe?
Yes, if you'd like.
I was just in Georgia, actually, in Gruzia, Georgia, last month. We took our mother there for her 90th birthday. She was born in Kutaisi in Georgia. Even though her family doesn't come from Georgia, it's my father's side, the Yakubashvili side. So going there, I recognized a lot of the cultural behavior of people, just the average person in the street. And I saw a lot of it in myself and my family members that we inherited from my father. A certain jovialness, a certain warmth, also, I would say a side that is maybe not such a beautiful side, which is lack of boundaries at times. So those are some of the features that I see. And there's also, my family at least, Jacobashvili, has a certain type of idea. You want to make a real global change. And I see that in a lot of my cousins that are not even grew up necessarily as I did in a more religious environment, the idea of doing something that will change the world in some way. Those are some of the features.
Did you enjoy the cuisine? I find it to be the best cuisine in the world, and I'm a foodie, so.
Yeah, I can't say I compared it yet, but I've always liked Georgian cuisine. There's, here in New York, where I live, there's a Georgian restaurant in Queens. And of course there, when we were there in Tbilisi, the kosher restaurant there, and it was delicious. I liked the food very much.
Wonderful. You called yourself a rebel.
What's your favorite food?
I love everything. So tsivi, I love hachapuri. I mean, can you not? Ajap sandali. I mean, I can go. There's nothing I don't like. I ordered the spices from Georgia because I'm a gourmet cooks, but it's another topic of the conversation. It's just.
Go on. Sorry, I just was wondering.
No. It's okay. You called yourself a rebel without a cause as a teen. What did it look like?
I always challenged whatever I was told, authority, and I never just accepted things because everybody else did. So it was always this type of tension. I mean, wasn't particularly disruptive, but in my mind and in some of my conversation, I was always that type of skeptic. And that's how it manifests mostly. It was not in any violent way or any destructive way, but internally, it was not. Let's put it this way: the antithesis of herd mentality and conformity.
Absolutely, I understand that. Did it come from what seems like open-minded family that was open to different books, literature, and
I think there was a combination of nature and nurture. There's certain wiring, because later I recognized my father had that in him. My mother also, to less extent, but also. And then also growing up in an environment that did that. My father was a journalist, and conversations at our table were always somewhat irreverent and challenged status quo. I think a combination of both, now that I look back. And actually, it was for me, it was very conducive and healthy. I don't know what I would have been like had it been like straitjacketed in a more dogmatic environment. I think it was a combination of both, nurture and nature.
Were your siblings the same way? I know you're the oldest of 5.
I'm the oldest of 5, right? Yeah, they all have an element of that. Some of us more than others. I think I may be the most, but they all have that element, and they definitely respect it. They're not like the other extreme. They may not be so aggressive about it, but they all have element of it. Yes.
I read, or I heard in the interview that you gave, that you heard music in Rebbe's speech that moved you, that you became a man with a cause and a mission. What would describe that music? What was that you heard on that day when Rebbe was speaking?
Well, it wasn't just a one-day thing, one moment. It was accumulative. But I do remember certain epiphanies I had. I remember it was the year 1975. It was the holiday of Shavuot, which is around May 1975. And I'll describe by the feeling I had. It was like a description of what makes things tick. We look at the world around us on the surface level, everything seems a certain way. But when you, for example, study physics, you realize that there's pulsating subatomic particles. And I sense the same thing when the Rebbe spoke, that there's a spiritual energy within everything. And it just, to me, felt so, it so resonated. It was like music, literally like music. When you hear music, something touches you in a deeper place. It's not just the sound. It's like a certain resonating truth that I sensed, and that grew as time passed. And I realized it's like a whole inner narrative of outer experience. So whatever you see happening is only the outer surface, like the tip of the iceberg. And what you see is not what you get, which means there's much more going on. And that was the thing that was really, to me, very musical and very, very deeply moving.
How much time did pass since you became Rabbi, transcribing, preparing speeches and editing Rebbe's speeches from that moment?
So that was around 1975. I was 17, 18. As I became more, we'll call it absorbed or mesmerized, I would even say, and enthralled by the whole experience. It was like, for me, a love affair. It was like I really was in love with the whole, the ideas, but it was more than just philosophy. As I said, it was experiential for me, literally like music. So I became more immersed, and I was very intrigued by the whole process, not just of the ideas themselves, but how they were communicated and how they were disseminated. So I started hanging around 1975, probably that year. I started hanging around the group of people that would review when the Rebbe would speak on Shabbat and holidays, when no recordings were made and no notes were taken. So it had to be memorized. So I hung around and I became very much part of that team, and I got better at it. And then around 1976, 77, I began helping edit some of these talks as they were transcribed and prepared for publication, began researching, helping annotate and referencing and cross-referencing. By 1979, I became one of the main writers, and then at the end of 79, I became the main writer of these talks. So it was a process over several years, like so to speak, being trained and learning on the job. And then I was able to carry it. It wasn't easy. I remember, but after the end, around December 79, I became the formal official writer of these, what they call farbrengens or talks, that were often entire transcripts that were consisted of 60, 70, sometimes 100, 120 pages per week that we had to produce, which was a full-length presentation of these ideas, but in an organized and annotated way. And that I did from 1979 till the Rebbe had a stroke in 1992.
To me, that listening to is astounding. And you mentioning training on the job, we're talking about not just 10-minute conversation. We're talking about speeches that last hours on end.
Right.
What on the, first of all, you have to have a talent, innate talent, ability. But you mentioned on the job training. How do you train somebody like that? I mean, is there...
Well, training is mostly experience, trial and error. So firstly, doing it, like if you want to swim, you can read all the books about swimming until you don't jump into the water. You're not going to learn how to swim. And then you start doing it, and then you learn technique. You learn how to do it better. You also watch those that have done it before you and learn from them. And I was very receptive, like a sponge. I was absorbing it all. And you learn the methodology. And frankly, I'm still learning, even today, except there's certain things I did master at the time. So it's like, if I would tell somebody there's no such thing as talented as you may be, you're going to make mistakes, and you have to learn from them. You can't be afraid of not swimming perfectly, because perfect is the enemy of good. And the same thing here. I started writing. Well, at first I started reviewing and repeating. Then I was able to do it more on my own, always correcting myself or having others help me and correct me. I was always receptive to being corrected. You can't let the ego get in the way, or pride. And you learn, and you really learn. And the more you exercise, I guess humility is a good word, where you don't think you know it all, the better you get. And as I got better, I was able to really carry it and build, and then confidence is built. I would think it would be like any challenging situation. You want to run a marathon of 22 miles. That's quite formidable challenge. So you run a mile, you run 2 miles, 3 miles, then it starts getting more difficult. And as you do it, you get better and better at it. I remember my father telling me once, he said, writing is always going to be difficult. However, the difference is today you don't know you can do it. And later, once you have experience, you'll know you can do it. But that doesn't make it easier. You just know that you have the confidence that you can do it. That's part of the process.
If I'll come to you, said, Simon, teach me how to do it. What would be what you tell me, what the main quality that the person need to have to record your speeches, for example?
Well,
that happened on Shabbos.
I'll tell you exactly what I would tell you. I would tell you to either listen to a recording of someone you want to repeat, reconstruct what they said, or even better, read a book, read a few pages, just a page or 2 or 3, read it as many times as you wish, close the book, and write down on a piece of paper the main points that you just read as best as possible. And then compare, how well did you do? Did you capture 70% of it, 50%, 40%, 90%? You will always see that you're going to capture less than you thought you could, because we always think we're smarter than we are, and we can absorb better than we. So the first thing to learn is that you're not that great at it. And once you learn you're not great, then you start getting better. So the point is to simply do it. And the way to do it, as I said, either to listen to a recording of someone speaking. Let's say you want to listen to a recording of a half hour of me speaking. Then shut the recording and sit down and write down, what did you just hear? As best as you can. It's not going to be perfect. It won't be complete. You'll miss things. But then you'll see, how much did I miss? And then the next time around, you'll get better and better. That's really the first step. I'll tell you why it's so difficult, because it's very humiliating in a way. And humbling, because you realize, you know what, I'm not really that good at this. Can I really do it? In the beginning, you'll say, 1 second, I can't repeat it. How could I recreate a half hour of speaking of 50? So do 15 minutes. But the key thing is that actually, the irony is, the more you realize how not good you are, the better you get. Because that's what pushes you, that motivates you. Again, I go back to swimming. You start swimming and you realize I can swim 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps, max. And I see people who swim 10 laps. That creates the competitive juices, the adrenaline starts running, and you get better. Now, how well you'll do, that you have to push until you get there. Some people have stronger muscles than others. But everyone can be better than where they are right now. That would be the way I would go about it. Now, remember, you have to also respect the wisdom that you want to recreate. Now, when I listened to the Rebbe, I was looking to a man that I respected, his intelligence, his wisdom, he was a sage. And I knew the importance, the historical importance of documenting his words for posterity. So it has to be important. Like if you ask me right now, can you listen to someone speak for an hour on talk radio nonsense? I'm not interested in remembering it. It's not important to me. Maybe a little entertaining, but I have no real reason to try to remember it in a way that I'll retain it. But if it's something that's important, that's a factor that's critical in this whole process. Those are some initial tips.
It's great. Keep your mind sharp, I'm sure, even years later.
Absolutely. I could, whenever I need to turn this on, I can. It's really comes down. But I use the word absorption very deliberately. It's like a dry sponge. Dry sponge absorbs. A wet sponge does not. The problem is adult minds, especially smart people, have so much knowledge and information that it's hard for them to absorb new information because their sponge is wet already. So whenever they hear an idea, they fit it into an existing framework. Whereas a child, for example, doesn't have preconceived notions, so they absorb very well. That's why you can teach children easily new languages, the ABC, and so on. And that was a big part of the process of like emptying your mind of all your ideas and just absorbing as if you're a child hearing something for the first time.
Anything you wish you told the Rebbe, but you didn't?
Well, this is a sensitive topic, actually. You know, I deal today with many people, as you mentioned, I counsel, and of course, people dealing with trauma and pain. One of the things I regret, I would have asked the Rebbe was more direction of how to deal with people, children especially, who grew up with trauma, whether it's sexual abuse or other traumas, because I would have wanted to hear the Rebbe's wisdom and sensitivity in that matter. So that's one of the things that I had access, but I never really, at the time, appreciated the need to get some more direction in that area. Since you're asking, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
yes,
that's one of the things I think about. I would have wanted to get some guidance in that area, how to deal with that. That's just one thing that comes to mind. So it's more of a personal type of guidance, like personal as in dealing with people's personal challenges. The Rebbe was this brilliant, besides brilliant, extremely empathetic, like soul. That actually was beyond cerebral. It wasn't just a scholar. You know, they say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. He cared. So there's so much to learn from a person who cares and has knowledge. And I know a lot of people are very smart, but they don't really care. They don't have that empathy. They have, they'll call it intellectual intelligence, but not emotional intelligence. And a man like the Rebbe had a combination, and it was very, very powerful to try to learn. And I learned much from his methodology, more than just his knowledge, the method, how you answer questions, how you approach a difficult situation. Even more important than just, I know it's like you said, teach someone how to fish instead of giving them fish, teach them how to fish. Don't teach them what to think, but how to think. That was something that you find someone like that in your life, hold on to it for your dear life, because that can help, that can transform your life.
And that's so important with younger generation, not to give them fish, but give them a fish line and teach them how to fish.
Methodology, yeah.
Toward a Meaningful Life is a profound book that you published about a year after Rabbi's passing. Did you receive any signs of approval or perhaps editorial advice from the Rebbe?
Not directly, because when I began writing it, it was in 1994, and the Rebbe had already suffered a stroke, so it was not accessible or communicative. But indirectly, yes, because I believe all the years that I worked in documenting and publishing his words taught me the method, as I was talking about method. So I felt very confident that I was capturing his approach. But I can't say that I presented to him a manuscript or even an early draft for approval. So it's really on my responsibility. But I feel confident, and I know my colleagues and the people who would naturally be critics, thank God when it came to that book, I haven't found anyone that really said, you know what, this idea I think I disagree with, or I would have presented differently. I'm not saying it's perfect. We're all human beings, and I'm sure I have my share of errors. But I would say I worked very hard in maintaining not just the integrity of the ideas, but the spirit of the ideas. As you know, there's one thing getting down the words, but there's also the between the lines. Make sure there's the feeling, the sentiment, the spirit is often even more important than the actual thoughts, to make sure it's in the right, because you could say the same thing in many different ways. And as you know, in communication, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You can say the same idea and you will you will offend people. You could say literally the same idea and people will be very responsive, depending what words you use, the tone, the sensitivity, not to be condescending. So I think because I was able to combine a lot of that, I feel very confident to say that I did capture, and I hope that the Rebbe, wherever he is, sees it and is satisfied and happy. But I think the results speak for themselves. It has touched and, as you mentioned, transformed many people's lives, and that to me is the ultimate litmus test. Doesn't matter my intentions. Did it achieve its desired objective, desired effect? And so I believe that it has, again, with all the qualifications of anything that a mortal, a human being creates.
Was it always said it doesn't matter your intention? Was it also an intention to transform life, to change the people's world and spiritual life, so to speak? Was that part of your intention as well? I can imagine it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's a little, let's put it this way, it sounds a little presumptuous or even arrogant to say, I'm coming to write a book to transform your life. But in my mind, what I felt would be success would be that someone reading a chapter or the book or the whole book would come away saying, you know what? I've discovered deeper insights and, more importantly, practical ways to make my life more meaningful, to make my life more fulfilling. And that to me is transformative. So the way you do that, I actually, in the back of the book, one of the favorite lines that actually I would quote the Rebbe often, he quoted from earlier sages, was words from the heart enter the heart. So if I want to enter in people's hearts and and transform or affect them, I need to write from my heart. So I had to have it also transform me. In other words, I had to identify with ideas. It wasn't just me like preaching and pontificating from an ivory tower, but rather like experiencing it myself. So when I write about pain, or I write about love, or I write about positive or challenging things in life, in a way I had to like go through it myself in my own way. And I was able to capture it in terms that people would touch them. Because as I said earlier, it's one thing to write down ideas. It's another is to touch people's lives with them. That requires a different level of intelligence. I should also add that my experience with people, I was giving classes and I was counseling people, and I was tremendous in informing. I didn't just write from the book. It wasn't just an academic work where I sat down with it and researched original source material in the Torah, in the Bible, in the Talmud, in the Rebbe's teachings. But the language I used was through the lens of human experience. So it's one thing to write about, let's say, pain or suffering. It's another is to write having experienced pain and suffering, either yourself or through others. And that to me was a critical piece because it made the ideas come alive in a very personal way. And I knew that was, to me, a critical objective. If I could not achieve that, I don't think I would have wanted to write the book, and I definitely would not think it would be successful. And I remember the publisher telling me when I asked, what's the sign of a successful book? Interesting answer that you may appreciate. And it was not, you think, success of a good book. People say sells millions of copies. Okay. They said, now the success of a book is when the one who reads the book recommends it to others or gives it as a gift. Because then it has a life. It means it touched them so much they're ready to share it and recommend it. Whereas a book that people read and they just put down and they never recommend to anyone doesn't have a real eternal life. It's not perpetual.
I think your book will have many eternal lives. I believe so myself.
I'm very honored and humbled by your words, and thank you.
What was the most interesting, memorable feedback that you received from the readers after the book came out about 30 years ago?
Yeah, there's so many stories. Yeah.
Just the first comes to mind.
Well, one of the most dramatic that comes to mind is a story I share often. A woman in St. Louis, an executive, who wrote me a letter after reading the book. If you like, I could share with you from memory that the letter, briefly at least.
Yes.
She writes that she was in the audience when I spoke in St. Louis, because after the book came out, I was on a book tour. They sent me to different cities, and I spoke in the Barnes and Nobles or the JCCs or different venues. And she was in the audience, as she said, at first she was going to come over to me to have the book signed, but then she, I guess, got cold feet. And instead, she wants to write to me. And she writes that she's a 47-year-old executive that is very successful, very well known, and well respected in her community. However, beneath the veneer of success, she writes, lies a woman in shreds. Because you see, my soul was murdered when I was a young child due to the abuse I endured at the hands of my parents and other relatives. And she spells out physical, emotional, sexual, psychological abuse, which turned me into basically a self-loathing individual who trusts no one. And my life has been essentially a miserable life. And relationships especially suffer. I don't trust people. People don't trust me. I'm always testing people. And I've gone to all types of therapy. Nothing's really worked. So what I do is I breathe in and out. I take day by day. Sometimes I even feel suicidal. And I hope I'm not being too raw here, but that's the letter. And then she continues and says, so I've long given up hope. You know, what I do, people like me do when we're lacking inner control of life, we create outer control. I became super aggressive, super successful, super achiever, and I'm always trying to prove myself. But again, it doesn't really help on the inside. Right? Someone happened to give me a copy of your book. I'm Jewish, but I don't identify with anything that's Jewish because my parents were Jewish, of course, and anything they embraced, I reject. And I was looking at your book, glancing through the pages, and one line jumped out at me. And the line said, in the beginning of the chapter on birth, birth is God saying, you matter. And I read it a second time, she writes to me. Birth is God saying, you matter. A third time, birth is God saying, you matter. And suddenly, like a silver bullet between my eyes, something touched me so deeply. And I realized after 47 years of my life that despite what my parents told me, that I'm worthless, despite what society tells us that we're just a statistic on someone's balance sheet, despite when many people tell you that your value is based on your looks, your youth, your productivity, your social status, your buying power, despite all that, what makes me really matter is the one that matters most, God. God says, you are my child. You're indispensable. Doesn't matter your mood. Doesn't matter how productive you are. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are. Doesn't matter your status. You are a divine creature, a divine child. So though I have many years to heal, she says, I have my work cut out for me. And that is to reconnect to that moment when I was born, before the abuse, and bypass the infected arteries that the abuse and trauma caused. Reconnect to that moment when God said, I love you unconditionally. You are necessary. You matter. Birth is God saying you matter. And then she concludes, so thank you for giving me back my life. That's probably one of the most, I would say, life-altering experiences I had as a result that I heard feedback from a reader. I went back to read the chapter again to see it through her lens. I remember I was sobbing, I was crying, because she's sharing a sacred trust with me, and she doesn't know who I am. I wrote back to her offering support, asking her permission to tell the story. She asked me not to say her name. And I've told the story probably to hundreds of thousands of people. And it resonates with many people, of course, because that message that you matter absolutely literally saved her life is, what can I say? It speaks for itself.
Thank you for sharing. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
What that letter could be a legacy by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Your book was translated in 14 languages, and you have global recognition all around the world. People know you. How do you stay humble?
First of all, how do you know I'm humble?
Is that not
Right.
right? I have a feeling that you are. I listened many of your talks and lectures and interviews. I believe you are.
Okay. Well, I thank you.
Prove me wrong.
Well, let me say this. I do take pride. I cannot say that I have absolutely no feeling of fulfillment or gratification when I see, you see your work bears fruit and has effect. But the humble part, I have to say, I learned from my Rebbe, from my teacher. And I'm sure he learned it from his teacher. And I quote Rabbi Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, where he says that Moses, the Torah says that Moses was the humblest man that walked on this earth. And the question is asked, Moses, the great Moses, God chose him, a brilliant man, maybe the greatest leader of all in whole of history, Moses of the Bible. Why was he the humblest? So he responds because Moses said, I may have all these gifts. He was not unaware of his gifts. It wasn't like he was delusional. It wasn't low self-esteem, he explains. It was he's saying to himself, these gifts were given to me by God. Had he given it to someone else, they may have done better than I. So he never deluded himself into thinking he's a self-made man. In other words, it's an understanding that even when you do accomplish something, by all means, recognize it. It's not about, as I said, becoming a doormat or self-deprecating in any way, or self-denigrating, but rather recognizing that the strengths that you have were given to you, and you have the honor to be a channel, a conduit of bringing them to others. That to me is the key to it all. So I cannot say I have no ego at all. We all have egos, but it doesn't get to me because I really recognize that I was blessed to have that. And that itself is a humble thing. That why was I blessed? I was chosen in a certain way. And I know one thing that I have to, that's my life. That's my life's mission. My job is to make sure that I use those strengths and to reach as many people as possible with this resonating message and help people. And hopefully those people will do the same as they pass on these teachings to the next generation or to their friends. They do see themselves as channels and conduits. I think that's the key. It's not that you don't have strengths. It's not that you don't know that you're not aware of your gifts, but it's knowing that they are not yours. You're basically a channel. And that is, I think, the ultimate blessing and gift.
For you, does it live somewhere near vulnerability? Being humble and being vulnerable, is that synonyms to you in that regard? That you're not a self-made man. Yes, you have healthy ego. You created something out of your life, but mostly it's God, it's Hashem.
It's an interesting question. I'm thinking about it as we speak. See, for me, vulnerable is a little broader than humble in a way. Because vulnerable means that I write in my book, in Torah Meaning Life, I think in the chapter on love, that true love is celebrating your vulnerability. Meaning not seeing vulnerability as weakness or something to be afraid of and be ashamed of, but it's actually something very powerful with the people you trust. Because obviously when you're vulnerable, you also can be hurt. And you want to make sure that you're vulnerable to the right people. So I think vulnerable to me is a lot more about like, you're stripped from all your skills and talents and strengths of your armor. Are you ready to be looked at like naked? I don't just mean physically, I mean in the psychological sense. So to me, it's like, yes, part of that is humility. I don't know if I would say it's synonymous. I think they go hand in hand. Healthy vulnerability, healthy, not unhealthy, is very much connected to the same idea that you can stand before God or you can stand before those that you love. And even if you have things that may not be so beautiful, you are comfortable because you can trust and people will not hurt you. People won't judge you. So that to me is where the vulnerable adds to just the humble, if I may.
I love the formula that you came up with for your life's mission. I'll let you elaborate on that. And I would love to know if you would change or pivot this formula that you could present it to a young person who might not have. I'll let you elaborate on the formula itself. And if you could touch on how perhaps you'll pivot or alter it to present it to a young person who are just starting out in their adulthood.
That's a good question. Okay. So the formula that I developed, I have a course called Discovering Your Personal Mission or Midlife Miracle, is a POP plus P plus H equals M. So POP is POPP, which is an acronym for personality, opportunities, people, places, plus P, passion, plus H, higher calling, equals M, your mission. In other words, it's essentially about self-awareness. Know thyself. Because, for example, if you have my personality, for instance, includes ability to communicate, to write. I have a certain psychological acumen and sense and awareness. So if I was, for example, a different type of personality, my mission would be different. So it's important to make sure your mission is aligned with who you are. And obviously the other factors as well, the opportunities that come your way, the people you know, the places you've been to. You know, if I was born in Georgia and remained in Gruzia, Georgia, and I only spoke Georgian, my mission would probably not include writing a book in English, maybe in Georgian and then translate it, but it wouldn't be so much to the English-speaking public. It would be more to the language that I grew up with. So the so-called coordinates of your life, think of them as like signposts that can help guide you, direct you where your mission and how your mission should be played out. And I grew up in New York, United States. Yes, I've traveled. So all these coordinates I speak about myself help me identify what my mission ultimately. Passion, of course, is critical because what are you passionate about? That tells you another aspect of your identity. And then finally, a higher calling. Every mission cannot just be, my mission is to make a lot of money and to be happy and to bring up a happy family. Those are wonderful things, but they always have to have some way it's helping the human race. It's helping others, some way that you're serving. And that equals M, ultimately your mission. So that's more of I call it a scientific formula, if you wish. And I know people who have done it, have really come to help them understand. First, you understand yourself. Then you suddenly realize, for example, my job that I do has nothing to do with my talents. It's just a way of making a living. That's what I fell into. But now to address the second half of your question, which is how do you translate or apply that to a younger person? I wouldn't necessarily use that formula because the younger person doesn't necessarily have a developed network of people or even the ability to analyze themselves that way. So I look at it in a very visceral and personal way. I always say this to parents. I say one of the biggest, maybe the biggest thing you can do for your children from the youngest age, not just to tell them before they go to sleep and when they wake up in the morning, good night, I love you, and tuck them in, but also say you were sent to this world to accomplish something that you and only you can accomplish. And I, as your parent, am honored to be, example I often give is a gardener in your garden to help you cultivate, to help you let your flower blossom, get rid of the weeds. And it would be the greatest thing for me as a parent to be your support, to always know that I'm there for you, to help you spread your wings and become the person that you are able to become. In other words, to infuse in children from the youngest age a sense of mission. That is not done, not in our schools and not in our homes. We're taught we live much more of, I would call it, survival-centric lives. How to live, how to survive, how to make money, how to pay your bills. But mission-centric life, that your life is a mission. Just like an astronaut is sent to space with on a mission. Your soul was sent to this world to accomplish something, to turn your corner of the world into a beautiful garden. Children hear that from a young age, guarantee you that it will be part of their life forever and ever. And it will also evoke conversation. What exactly does it mean, a mission? What is a soul? We have in Judaism the traditional prayer in the morning. We say, Moda Ani, thank you for returning my soul to me. Say that with your children. Your children start asking, what's a soul? Where did it go? Where is it returning from? It just creates a more soulful conversation through the day. And I'm a big believer that the more mission-centric your life, the more preventive and preemptive medicine that is, that will protect the person as they get older from all the ails and the ills out there that are like the predators that want your attention and distract us. It's like when you don't have direction, what do you think is going to happen? Forces outside of you are going to direct you and influence you. Whereas if you are mission-centric from within, it gives you a sense of purpose that you are proactive and you're driving the ship, not someone else is driving your ship. That's the way I would frame it.
What is your mission statement?
I'm always ready for that question because you can't talk about a mission statement if you don't have one yourself, right? My mission statement that I developed actually when those earlier formative years that we've talked about, the rebel years, my teenage years, is to use the skills and gifts I was given in communication, in writing, in teaching, and speaking, and a certain psychological acumen I mentioned, a certain psychological insight, to use those skills to reach as many people as possible and empower them to find their mission, to give them the courage and the tools that they have within them to sing their unique song. That's my mission.
Did it evolve throughout your life, or it needs to evolve to be reevaluated when you are 25 or 30 or 45?
The mission never changed. I articulate it better now because I have years of experience and I have things that I've accomplished. But the mission, if you had met me when I was probably 20 or 19, 20, probably would have said something similar, maybe not as eloquent, because again, you're young, you don't have all the words. But the mission has not changed at all. It's the same thing I've been doing. Then I was doing it more on an academic level a bit. Today I do it more on a broader scale, a little more universal, but it's essentially the same mission. What's changed is the tools we have. When I was 20 years old, there was no computer. There was a typewriter. There were no fax machines. There was no internet. There was no AI, all the social media. So what's changed is just the different tools and platforms to accomplish the mission. But the very mission hasn't changed at all in my situation. And I think real missions don't really change unless you change. You know, suddenly if I, God forbid, lost those skills, then I couldn't accomplish it. But as long as God blesses me with those skills, the mission, I believe, is the one that is why my soul came to this world. I'm very confident and secure in that.
Is the formula tied to psychospiritual map of life for the soul?
Not sure what you mean exactly, but it is tied. It is the psycho-spiritual map because unless you mean the different levels of the soul, I'm assuming is what you're referring to, like the 5 dimensions of soul. Is that what you are alluding to or not? Or maybe not?
I heard one of your earlier conversation. You mentioned that, and I loved it, the term.
Okay.
I think I understood it, but I want to clarify. But it seems very similar to the mission. And
yeah. I'll tell you what it is. We're told, the mystics teach us that there are 5 dimensions to the soul. Just quickly, in Hebrew, it's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. But I'll translate it into English. The biological soul, which is basically the soul that gives us biological life. So when you say life, what's life? You're breathing, your heart is beating, your mind is working, basic functions. The second is emotional life, feelings, love, attraction, repulsion. The third is intellectual part of the soul, which is the cognitive, the cerebral, the cognitive. The fourth is the transcendent needs we have, which are beyond the sensory tools, because the first three are all sensory, biological, emotional, intellectual. The fourth is already supersensory, more transcendent, that we experience sometimes through music, through art, through love, through sensuality, sexuality, through faith, religion. And finally, the fifth is called Yechida. Fifth is like that. We'll call that inner core, the gentle, soft, subtle voice within the soul that connects everything. Just that unifying place where everything is in harmony. So in that sense, yes, discovering your mission, you can discover it on the functional level, the biological level, but you really want to discover it on all five levels. So that's like the psycho-spiritual map of the soul, and the journey of we'll call it higher consciousness and higher awareness is going exactly through those five steps I just enumerated. From the survival level, I need to eat, drink, rest, exercise. But then there's a deeper emotional dimension to it, and then a deeper intellectual, all the way to the transcendent, and all the way to that unifying principle. So in another way of putting it is like any project, any book you write, any music composed, any architecture built, always begins with a vision, which in turn translates into, a mission, which in turn translates into an intellectual outline, then an emotional experience, and then a final product. So if you think of these five steps, they're actually the five steps of all creations, of anything we create. Starts with a ethereal vision that is very united, unites everything, and then moves into actualization and becomes more concrete. Just like a seed you plant in the ground is just a concentrated seed, but that seed, as it begins to blossom, develops into a whole full infrastructure. That's a quick overview of that.
Thank you. If we're spiritual beings on a physical journey and there's life after death, is there a soul plan for early exits, like a suicide? That's actually a question from my childhood friend who lost her son to suicide.
Yeah. Well, suicide deserves its own discussion. I wouldn't just throw it into the soul's journey, because suicide could also be, sadly, an aborted life journey, where it's difficult to say was pre-planned by something, because a person came to a point, sadly, tragically, where they felt that their life was worthless, or was so painful that the pain of death was less than the pain of living. And it's horrible. I've obviously dealt with people, families, individuals, suicidal, that actually committed suicide. And I remember reading a letter from such an individual, a young woman in her early 20s, who took her life. And she writes, I don't want to take my life. It's just that living in my life, in my body, it's more painful. It's like you're in a burning building, and either you're going to burn alive or you're going to jump out the window and know you're going to die. But at least let's get it over with instead of burning alive. I remember reading that. I was so, I can't tell you, I was completely stunned, because it was coming from that gut. And, I usually don't think of it that way. So when it comes to suicide, I just want to be extra sensitive. I don't want to speak about the soul journey, because to me, it sounds like the journey, it's not judgment at all. Please, I also want to make sure that's clear. A soul was living its life in this world, and for whatever reason, whether it's mental health or other challenges that overcame the person, and they could not find and muster the strength and the willpower or the support systems necessary. So there, I almost want to reserve that kind of conversation for its own context. I hope you know what I'm saying, instead of just throwing it into, okay, it's another part of a soul journey. So every soul has a journey, it's true. But those souls that are taken from us too early, for whatever reason, whether it's suicide or premature death by accident or whatever it may be, or illness, I think it requires a certain more sensitive conversation of how to deal with that grief for especially a parent or a friend or relative. Did you see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. I understand. Another question for a friend later. A friend is going is coping with one parent losing battle to a terminal illness and another parent fading due to Alzheimer's.
Right.
How can I support her? What would be your words of advice or support to offer that hard time?
Well, I actually have a chapter on this, pain and suffering in Torah Meaningful Life. The first thing is what we find in the Torah in the Bible. When Aaron lost his two children, it says, "Vayidam Aaron." Aaron was silent. I think we have to be talk about being humble, and not try to find explanations and rationalizations. The last thing that I think any of us should try to do. Like one of the great rabbis said to a person who suffered a tragedy, he said, "I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you." So I think for any of us that are dealing with family or friends in that situation, hold their hand, show that you're there. Remember, a lot of us cower and retreat because we feel awkward or we feel inadequate. And we don't want to go there. It's a very painful place. But I would suggest be there. Hold the hand, comforting words, loving words. I would not look to try to explain. It's not a time for philosophical or theological explanations. Because frankly, let's be honest, the greatest mind cannot console a bleeding heart. A mother lost a child. What are you going to say to the mother? That I have some mystical, philosophical reason why it happened? So to me, the silence, I say the silence, I mean understanding that there's a mystery and a mystique and things we cannot fathom does much more honor to grief and to tragedy than all the words that we can use. So that doesn't mean you can't say anything. It just means not trying to explain. It's not a scientific theory that's going to just get rid of the problem. And let's say you find some good explanation. You think, someone will say, okay, now I understand why the tragedy happens. Okay, all great. So I think it's critical to have that empathy. Then there's a second point. As a person grows through it and they are able to have conversations, maybe after the grief and the shock in those stages, so part of the catharsis could include at some point learning more about the journey of the soul. I have a very powerful chapter in Torah Meaningful Life called Death and Grieving. For some reason, I hear from many people who unfortunately are sitting Shiva or have had a death in their family, that chapter is very comforting. I would definitely suggest you or anyone that you see fit should read that chapter. I capture there this sentiment, this mixed, on one hand, surrendering to the mystery of it and not trying to rationalize it. On the other hand, discussing the soul and its journey, because it's only being more soulful that allows us to connect our soul after it's moved on from this world, which is the second part of this, to be more soulful. And remember, the soul never really leaves. The soul sees you even if you don't see it. Let's put it that way, even after death.
Who do you, Simon Jacobson, turn to when you need advice? Yourself.
I don't have one source. I have a few people that I trust and respect, and some that are very good in certain areas, others in others. I've developed my own little network. So when I have something that I have a doubt in or question, I want to get another opinion, I have these different individuals, and they come and go in different ways. Some people I know for many years, some people I meet recently. Recently I've been dealing with a very difficult situation, not my own, but I was asked to advise on a very unhealthy marital situation with children, real mess. And I felt some of it was out of my depths, out of my league. So what I called was a few key people who really understand. In my own personal dilemmas, it comes down to, I have a very lovely and intelligent wife that I speak to. Shandy is her name. In certain areas, some things I go to others that are either relatives or friends. And I don't have a real formula for it. I just, depending on the situation, I speak to different individuals.
Were you ever nervous to speak in front of a large crowd?
Depends what you mean by nervous. Listen, I take it seriously. I don't do it flippantly, so it's not like I just get up there. So once you take it seriously, you always want to make sure you're going to have the right impact. So there's always a certain apprehension, I guess, or feeling, that I'm going to be speaking now. And it's like, I almost like put pressure on myself to perform well, if you know what I'm saying. But I don't have any stage fright. I've never had a situation where like I'm frozen or nervous in the sense like the first few minutes jittery or anything like that. And that probably comes because I have experience. I've done it. Once you've done it, you can do it. But I think even the best at anything always have a measure of as I said, I don't know the word apprehension is the right word, a measure of questioning. And sometimes that was what causes me to crystallize. Like sometimes I'll get up and I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to say. I mean, I know what I want to say in general, but then something clicks because I feel I really need to get it clear. So I have confidence in my own skills and knowledge. I know basically I have an arsenal within me that I know I could always call upon. And that's one of the things that works for me, that gives me more confidence, that if I'm speaking and I feel I'm not getting through to the audience, I can easily change tracks. I don't go by any script, as I mentioned before. So that is very good for me because it means I'm not stuck to one script and then, too bad. If it's not working, it's not working, and sometimes a joke falls flat or a story or other things. So what I do is I'll just change course based on the audience. I also know that reading an audience is critical for me. Sometimes you read it well. Sometimes you see they're not really responding to what you wanted to get across. So again, changing channel, so to speak, or changing tone or method works. So all that's part of the process that helps me feel more confident. So I don't know if I answered your full complete question. There's an element of it, but not quite as let's say, somebody who's never done it before would be nervous because I've never done it. And I know people who really, really have serious resistance to speaking in public, a fear of that. I don't have that at all.
You have an incredible sense of humor, and coming originally from Odessa, I appreciate it so much. Is that a big part of your life?
Odessa is known for its humor?
Yeah, Odessa, Ukraine. Yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Still is. You can take like New York. You can take a person out of New York and take New York out of the person. The same thing with Odessa, I think.
Okay, good.
And I appreciate it so much. It's not rare when you come. It's not often that you come across somebody who's with natural sense of humor as you are. Do you start with that? Do you use that when speaking to public, or do you first read the room? I mean, you have such a funny stories, interesting stories that bring you chuckle.
It's a very good question. The rule usually is open up with a joke because you get this crowd warmed up, and in general, it just creates a much more calm and relaxed environment. I don't always do that. Sometimes I feel it's a little fabricated. I don't like to be fabricated, like come with a ready joke. I've done it at times. I can't say it's a rule, but in a way, I'm a disruptor. I disrupt these rules. So sometimes I resist going by that. But what I do is usually I get more comfortable as I speak and it comes more natural to me. So certain jokes or certain satirical humor, I guess, social satire about human conditions come up throughout the talk, and certain ideas are really reinforced through a nice humorous anecdote. So for me, it's more the natural type, but at times I will open up. I hear a good joke and I try to use it early on. I don't really have a rule. I try to balance it.
I know you met people from all walks of life. Is there anyone impressed you the most, certainly aside from the Rebbe, who's a person in his own category?
I'm actually, as much as I could also be critical, I'm actually impressed by many different experiences that sometimes are surprising even. I was just listening to the widow of Charlie Kirk, speaking at the memorial, and I was very touched and impressed by her presentation and her ideas. So I don't, you're asking in general about a person. So I will listen sometimes to a talk of a person I never heard before, and the way they present a certain authenticity, certain resonating truths, certain things that really, like I feel, really have a powerful message. And it can come from all kinds of strange places, in my mind. The Rebbe for me is a constant presence in my mentor, my teacher. So someone I would turn to all the time. But I go by the edict in the statement. I know edict is the right word. The statement in the Mishnah, in the Ethics of the Fathers, that says, "Who is the wise person? The one who learns from everyone." I find that very often. I hear people speak, and I learn from it. To be very frank, I've sometimes heard things from people that I really disagree with, that actually may even hate me or Jews, but they say something and I learn from it. Not to say that I agree with them about everything. So that's my general approach in life. Are there people? There are individuals that I respect. I feel like you could trust their ideas. I'm thinking right now, some of the great speakers. Unless I'm just thinking of this generation. I like in physics, I love physics. One of my pet peeves, I should have mentioned that, was Richard Feynman. The way he spoke and explained physics in very simple language was very impressive. I find that Jonathan Sachs, more an intellectual approach, so very well spoken and very articulate. But this is not by no means I'm trying to rule out anyone else. I'm just some names that just come to mind quickly here. So I don't want to omit anyone, and that should be seen as an insult. That's not at all my intention. But I do learn from many, many. Yeah.
You describe yourself as a 17-year-old with a number of years of experience. That's how you define your age. Do you feel the same way today?
Absolutely. I'm 17 with 51 years of experience now. The experience keeps growing, but the 17 years is always eternal. Because I feel that type of spark, I guess, spontaneity, a certain energy, a certain enthusiasm, I would say idealism. And I hope that never wavers and never wanes.
Hope so too. Any fears?
Fears. Yeah. The biggest fear is not fulfilling my mission to the full capacity that I was capable of. Not a fear that I tremble with, but it's a fear like sometimes I can be talk about being Georgian, Jacobashvili. Sometimes I feel that I dream more than I implement. So the fear of remaining in a dream level, fantasy, so to speak, and not, getting excited by the idea and not executing. So that's one of my definite fears.
Any regrets?
You ask very vulnerable questions. Regrets.
You don't have to answer if
No, I'm not. I said all the questions are acceptable. No, I just have to think. I want to give you an honest answer. Okay. On one hand, I don't have regrets because I'm just not a person of regrets. I may regret something right after it happened, but not in time. I don't have anything I look back and say, should have done very differently. I have things I've learned, like, that I would now advise my children and grandchildren, for that matter, things that was not advised to me, but not so much as regrets. Because I also look at life as a big picture. If I regret one part, then I also may have to forego other parts that were very good in my life. Sometimes, your weaknesses are also your strengths. So I don't have regrets in that sense. I'm thinking if there's anything. No, not really. And I also see even setbacks, it's just my way of thinking, even setbacks, even things that should be regretted, I see them, okay, so now redeem them. Figure out what you learn from it and make it better. And you can't change the past, but you can learn from it and you can learn to become a greater person. That's generally my attitude to things that didn't work out exactly as I wanted.
That's a great attitude. What do you think your legacy will be?
Probably best that others determine that than myself. I feel that part of the legacy will include hopefully being a pioneer in charting a course that was able to translate and bridge the timeless teachings of Judaism that did transform the world by bringing the cherished values that we have, but being a type of bridge into the contemporary world. I feel we're on the edge, the threshold of a new revolution, a spiritual revolution, and would be honored to be part of that. My legacy would be that I was one of the pioneers that helped usher that in by empowering people with their deep spiritual tools to live out their lives to the fullest and be part of this revolution that's coming, or is already in progress, but accelerate.
What makes you laugh?
That question made me laugh, but almost everything. I find humor almost everywhere, to be honest. I think for me, laughter is, looking at this thing that ordinary people look at with a different lens. A good joke, a good laughter is giving a type of almost social commentary with a twist. And you say, looking at human beings, seeing sometimes the absurdity of life, and just having that light-hearted spirit that also not to take yourself and others so seriously. So when you have that sense of humor, that's my general way of looking at things. I don't know if it's any specific thing. Some jokes I hear that are really great, and I try to remember them. Whenever you're asked to say a joke, you usually don't remember, but you just keep it in your bank. But I always feel that humor is a tremendous way of commenting on life.
And the last question, what do you find extraordinary in every day?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I always quote the Baal Shem Tov who said that the difference between a miracle and a natural event is only frequency. If the sun were to rise once in our lifetimes, we'd think of it as a miracle. Look at this ball, sun rising. But since it happens every day, we get used to it. So essentially, a miracle, nature is just a bunch of repeated miracles. The birth of a child is a miracle, but it's happening so often. Every breath, here we are, you and I, an average adult breathes between 12 and 18 breaths a minute. We don't even know that. You go to a hospital, God forbid, you see someone struggling on a respirator. You realize, wow, breath is a miracle. How many mechanisms have to work for us to breathe? Inhale, take in the oxygen, eliminate the carbon dioxide, and retain the nutrients and mixed with the blood. So to me, life is all about seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. No question about it. Those of us that can maintain that will never have a boring life. We'll never have a life of monotony. We'll always see adventure and excitement and spontaneity because we don't live in an inanimate universe. Even if this room is empty, it's pulsating with energy all the time. And especially when you study the mystical teachings, Hasidic teachings, it says that every fiber of existence is vibrating with divine energy every moment. And I like to feel that I live my life that way, which is constantly being in touch with that vibrancy, that dynamic vibrancy within everything in existence.
That was Simon Jacobson, a philosopher, a poet, and spiritual life guru and coach. Thank you, Simon Jacobson.
Thank you very much. It was a real honor, pleasure to speak with you.